Welcome to Seven Figures and Beyond with your host, Greg Shuey, your e-commerce marketing expert.
All right. Welcome to episode 7 of the Seven Figures and Beyond podcast. So apparently today our lucky number is 7. Episode 7 of the Seven Figures and Beyond podcast. So today is going to be absolutely epic. So I hope you enjoyed last week's episode. And have taken some time to start looking at some of the ways to take your customer data collection to the next level. I know that I've already made a few tweaks to the post-purchase surveys that I have on both of my brands that I own. So I was super, super excited about that discussion. So let's talk about today's guest. I think we've probably had this one on the books for well over a month. I think we even had to move the date once because you were traveling. But
yep, that's right.
Our guest today, his name is Dan Barnes, and he is one of the founders of PhoneSoap. If you don't know who PhoneSoap is, they manufacture and sell UV light phone sanitizers. They're a Shark Tank brand, so super cool. For those who are familiar with the show Shark Tank, they got a deal with Lori. Is that right, Dan?
That's correct. Yep. Lori Greiner.
Yeah. So if you want to watch the episode, you can go and Google it. I watched it again last night, and those sharks were pretty ruthless to you and Wes.
Aren't they always? Oh, it was painful.
Oh, man. Some of those questions and some of the things they said, I got a giggle. And you guys looked like deer in the headlights a couple of times. It was awesome.
Yeah. You can recommend your viewers watch. I will not recommend that.
Oh, man, I love it. All right. So before we dive into our discussion today, Dan, would you please take a few minutes to introduce yourself to our listeners and please share a little bit about your personal story and how you've gotten to where you are today?
Okay. Yeah, it's great to be here, Greg. Thanks for having me. I am Dan Barnes. My personal story / professional story, I guess they go hand in hand. I grew up in California. Always wanted to be an entrepreneur, washed windows as a kid, painted addresses on curbs. Actually, one of the first things that got me interested is I had a desk job working for a local accountant, and my neighbor asked me if I wanted to prepare the Little League baseball fields. And so I got to drive the cart around and draw the lines out, but he gave me a flat, payment for completing the job, right? It was the first time I realized, like, okay, the harder I work, the faster I do this while still doing good, the more I technically get paid. And so that kind of, I think, spurred my mindset away from, technically an hourly job, right? But that's not to say I still didn't do that. Coming out of college, we launched PhoneSoap, at least the ideation, while we were at university, and we can talk about that. But coming out of college, we were still figuring out supply chain, manufacturing, all the above. And so I did take a full-time job at Zappos first, running their digital marketing for Zappos. I was focused mostly on paid search. And that was, in 2009. So technically the early days. It was a lot of fun.
Wild West.
Wild West. And, there wasn't like good attribution between us and all the other channels. And so, we'd be at all hands meetings and they'd be like, hey, operating spend's going up and revenue's not going up much. And I'm like, it could be that the marketing team is spending hundreds of millions of dollars. and we all think we're making hundreds of millions of dollars. But it was a lot of fun. Learned a lot, learned by fire. I'd done some stuff, some ebooks, some other things, but I was lucky enough to just jump right in and start making bids and learning how to run campaigns. From there, I went to American Eagle Outfitters and oversaw all of their digital marketing. And that was a lot of fun. That was in Pittsburgh. So we went from Vegas for Zappos to Pittsburgh for American Eagle Outfitters, and then eventually opened up an office with them in San Francisco for a few months. And it was about that time that PhoneSoap had a final product ready to go. So it was still a calculated risk, but a little less risky than it would have been 4 years previous. And that kind of took us back to PhoneSoap, which we'll talk about. But, I've got 4 kids ranging from 9, almost 10 to 1.5, almost 2. that keeps me mostly busy outside of work. And then, neighbors like Greg also keep me busy. So
I was just going to mention that. I think on our last episode, I mentioned that you and I are neighbors and have gotten to know each other really well over the last 4 years. I'm
yep.
kind of that weird, creepy neighbor that gets bored, and then I wander the streets in the evenings and on
Yeah.
Saturdays. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I kind of poke my nose in other people's businesses, see
Yes.
what are you cutting that wood for? Like, let
Yeah.
me
I
see
had to
your
add,
project.
yeah, I had to add more security cameras to know when Greg was coming. No, it's great. We love having you as a neighbor, and yeah, you keep us all close. It's fantastic.
It's not a good thing how nosy I am. It's not. So, oh man. So yeah, it's been super fun to chat with you a lot and kind of get
Yeah.
updates on how the brand has evolved over time. And I'm excited to kind of hear more about that today.
Yeah.
So I've put together a few questions to guide our conversation. Are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Perfect. All right. So, and I prepped you on some of these questions,
I
but not.
did. I read some of
This
them.
is a surprise. I did some research yesterday, and I
Oh,
learned that as of October 2023, you are the 13th largest Shark Tank company. Did you know that?
yes. I did because they asked me, and I had to give them some numbers. And we were on, I think this season they had like a top, I thought it was top 10. It was top 15, and luckily we still made it.
That's
So I did
awesome.
see that episode go out. It's great. I mean, it's something we're very proud of.
That's so cool. When I saw that, I'm like, he's never told me that. So that's super cool. Did you see a little bump in sales from that update?
Little bit. I mean, it's a little less noticeable now. And when we first aired, which we'll talk about, it was pretty obvious anytime we had a re-airing, obviously the first airing, but to
Yeah.
your point, even re-airings, we noticed these are a little less so, in the last few years, but
Yeah.
we still get spikes. We still get sales every time we re-air.
You wake up one morning and you're like, wonder what that was. Did we re-air
Yeah,
on Shark Tank?
exactly. No, that was a conversation. And we've had our marketing team would know when they were coming often too. They'd look it
Oh,
up
okay.
or kind of figure it out because they knew it was worth it. So
That's awesome. So the first time you aired was 2015.
yes.
So how did that really accelerate your sales through the last
Mhm.
half of the 2010s and kind of into the pandemic?
Yeah.
I assume that that really impacted all areas of your marketing. Is that right?
Yeah, very much so. We started in like 2009 or 10-ish, just the idea. And the idea itself was catchy. And so it's kind of reminded me of it's been years since I read it, but like Made to Stick, just this idea of like, we first started with marketing around, hey, yeah, there's poop on your phone, right? Just really lighthearted, funny,
All you
stupid.
sickos, take your phones into your
That's
bathroom.
right. And back then, no one admitted they did that, right? But
Sure.
we knew we did it. And so it was just really kind of like gimmicky and fun, and people liked it. So we got a lot of early marketing, just hits on, well, we launched on Kickstarter, and that got us little hits on all the tech blogs. And so we
Yeah.
had some momentum, some more, high level brand-ish type momentum without like, paying for it or really knowing what we were doing. Um, and we got one really good land in Staples. And so that really gave us momentum going into Shark Tank. I'm not so sure what would have happened if it weren't for that. So we filmed for Shark Tank in 2014, and it's like it was almost a year from first meeting with Shark Tank to airing. Not filming,
Wow.
filming was somewhere in the middle,
Yeah.
but it was a long process and it was a lot of fun. Um, but the airing itself was very valuable, right? We had a massive spike for where we were at, the night of airing. And then the branding that came from that was also significant. All of the posts, the blogs, I don't follow it as much anymore. I'm not so sure how big it is now, but back then, if you were on Shark Tank, you were written about, all over the place.
You're on
So,
TechCrunch and all of these tech
mhm,
blogs and so much PR.
so much PR.
Yeah.
So there, by the time we got on, there wasn't like a fee, equity, price, nothing. It just, you got on. So it was just this
Yeah.
massive commercial that did extremely well for us. And moving the business up, it was more than just sales, because from the airing, it was the partnerships that came out of it. Lori Greiner really, is fantastic and was so great to work with. She got us almost immediately. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I think the night we aired, I might have been on QVC, if not that weekend, the week after.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, she plans it all out. Like, she knows
Yeah.
what she's doing. She kind of, they don't really tell you. They're like, "Oh, we don't know when you'll air or if you'll air." And I'm sure you'll have a Shark Tank podcast at some point where you'd go more in depth there. But she kind of knew it was coming and had already got us on QVC and kind of had our first air date like right in hand with that. And so, that changed our business dramatically. We were on QVC for 5 years, and it moved our scale up dramatically, right? So
Yeah.
before that, we were all direct to consumer. I mentioned Staples. There was kind of one big PO there, and we'd had a few other smaller wholesale partners. Think Geek, I don't think they're even around anymore, but they
Yeah, I
were like,
haven't thought about them forever.
yeah, they were one of the first guys to pick us up. So we had some momentum, mostly direct to consumer. But QVC, at the time, a real, an MBA would look at us and say, "Hey, percentage of QVC to your business is too large," right? but
Right.
but it was amazing, and it allowed us to decrease costs, nearly 50% from where we used to be, just with getting that type of momentum. So it was a big boost to our brand, our margin, our revenue, all the above, particularly coming from QVC and Bed Bath and Beyond and some of the partnerships that came out of that.
Interesting. Do you know, for some of our listeners, is it incredibly difficult to get onto QVC if you're not connected with someone like Lori?
Yeah, in fact, we had tried before and they told us
Hmm.
no.
Why?
So it just the health concerns, kind of the FDA, et cetera, around our product, which you mentioned. We, for the most part, sell UV sanitizers, and
Yeah.
we started out focused on cell phones. Coming out of Shark Tank, between Shark Tank and moving into, we'll call it the pandemic, we've spread out into other electronics, and now post pandemic, we'll talk about other products we did, but yeah, so we had a UV sanitizer, our original one, brought it to QVC, and we actually got some communication from them, but the answer was no. It's
Huh.
too. It's just not. Basically, they're watched very closely as to what they say on air. And same thing.
Interesting.
Even once I got on with Lori, it was still the same thing. There was only like 5 things I could say, and they were very heavily um, proved out by our third party results. And that's why QC was fun. You'd go on for like 10 minutes, and we basically have a minute pitch we just repeat over
Sure.
and over, and I'd say the exact same lines. And so you kind of got it figured out. But yeah, no, it's very difficult. At least for us, I mean, you might have a home run that just works, but we had multiple no's before Lori. And then with Lori, heavy legal work, making sure
Yeah.
our data was in order, and then a couple of test runs with her. I mentioned, basically 2015 through 2020, we were on air, and every year she'd tell me, "Look, just enjoy it while it lasts, because QVC kind of comes and goes." And so we
Yeah.
were one of the very few ones that at least she worked with that lasted that long. And I was lucky enough to go on air with her. It was just technical enough of a product that she'd bring me on with her. She doesn't always do that. And so, I built a great relationship with her and her team, and just a lot of fun flying out to Philadelphia. And I'd be out there almost every weekend in Q4, all the way through 2019. Come the
Yeah.
pandemic, it was all remote. I would call in, but it was, I don't, we haven't really done it since the pandemic. Um, but at least all my experience was positive. Again, Lori has great contracts. They can't send a lot of product back. So again,
Sure.
just going back to the value of Shark Tank, it was extremely helpful.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. So
Mhm.
once COVID hit, like things changed overnight for everyone and
Yeah.
every single business out there. So talk
Yeah.
to me about how you had to shift gears and to really
Mhm.
capitalize. And I hate saying this word, but the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the opportunity of COVID. Like,
Yes. Yeah. Well, I feel like we're one of those rare ones where we can say
yeah,
that and mean it. We're not just
yeah,
like, oh, the opportunity of people buying treadmills because they're stuck at home. It's like, no, the opportunity to really help people
sure.
and make a difference. So it was special. Um, it was. I mean, I remember it very well. I remember the first kind of meeting we had, which is like, well, things are changing quickly. So we do a lot of work in China. So we were already sort of tracking this,
Yeah.
because our factories already were concerned about it, and I can't remember if they were shut down yet. They might have been, but we were aware of it. and thought that it might be, some sort of business spike for us, but we weren't sure. Um, but as soon as it hit it, I think in our minds it's like March X. I can't remember. I remember that people have a
Right.
date, right? Like the 15th, the 18th,
It was
whatever.
like
The
the
NBA,
middle of the month. Yeah.
yeah, like the NBA shut down, and that's kind of the moment for everyone. But I remember it was just really late February for us where we started seeing the spike, where people finally started getting concerned.
Hmm.
So, we sat down, and I should have come a little more prepared. I don't remember when we sold out, but sometime in March, we saw a significant spike, and then we were sold out, in March.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of this mad rush of trying to figure out how to fulfill demand that where factories were shut down, right? Like I'm really proud of what we pulled off. We couldn't sell on Amazon, right? Because you can't really pre-order there.
Yeah.
So we were completely off Amazon, but we decided to, obviously keep our website live and kind of put our best bets, late summer delivery, right? I mean, this is months away,
Yeah.
and
No
people just
one's
kept
going
buying.
into work. Warehouse workers
Hmm.
can't come in to ship product. You didn't have
Hmm.
product, and you're just
We
like,
didn't
"Well, late
have
summer."
product, which I guess kind of worked to our favor, right? Because we weren't trying to balance how do we get our warehouses in the warehouse because there was nothing for them to do after we sold
Yeah.
out.
Right.
They had pretty much shipped it all going into like that main date where it's like everyone's got to go home.
Yeah.
And now it's not like there wasn't partial work to do and things to do, but we didn't have to have like hundreds of people in the warehouse. And so we kind of had this multiple month period of trying to figure out how to navigate having people in a warehouse while producing them.
Yeah.
So, we put the product on our website, we sold, and we accepted cash, right? And some businesses say, no, that's illegal. You accept cash when you ship. Others accept cash and it ships when it ships.
Yeah.
There's a mixed results on who you ask for. Now, of course, from like an accounting perspective, we didn't account for those sales until they shipped, but we collected the cash, and that was the only way we were able to fund our growth. Now,
Hmm.
I guess I should rephrase that. Because we did that, we didn't have to go look for funding. I'm sure we could have found funding because we had all of these orders, but we were able to self-fund our growth, and it was basically 5x, year over year, and it
Wow.
it happened rapidly. And I even remember we had an air purifier, which we hadn't launched yet, that we had planned launching later in the year, but we were like, no, we need to accelerate this. So we moved that up, and I think we launched it in April to also, just use the word capitalize, right? And that became more important as the pandemic went on because it moved a little away from surface and more towards air.
I remember walking into your living room and seeing it sitting there, and I'm like, "What the
Yes.
heck is that?" That was before you even launched it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I should have reminisced a little more, but it's all coming back to me. Like we had, if I'm remembering it right, it was like Singapore. There were just so many moments early on in the pandemic that were so meaningful for us where it connected it to phones. I want to say it was some government official in Singapore who said, we're able to track the transfer of this virus from cell phones, right?
Wow.
So it wasn't just like, hey, there's a virus. There was a message around phones and around
Hmm.
electronics and around services, and no one else was selling it but us. So there was one or two out there, and then coming out of the pandemic, which we'll talk about, there's now hundreds.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, right? Like we started our business marketing around, hey, your cell phone's dirty, right? And that was kind of our message going into Shark Tank. And then Shark Tank to the pandemic was kind of, well, your phone's dirty. Everyone's starting to admit that. Now UVC light's the best way to disinfect it. And that
Yeah.
was kind of our main messaging. And then moving into the pandemic, even before the pandemic, we started messaging more like, why does this matter? Right? Like, okay,
Mm.
your phone's dirty, you know how to clean it, but do you care? Does it actually make you sick? And then
Yeah.
that was just like the message during COVID, which is like, yes, you actually can have the flu and COVID and other things live on your phone and kind of come back and hurt you, right? And that was our message. You wash your hands, but then you touch your phone and your hands and your face are dirty again. So it kind of paired perfectly with that. And moving out of the pandemic, people are kind of sick of hearing that, which we'll talk about. And so the focus has more been like just a healthy lifestyle. But the pandemic was massive growth, something we're really proud of. Our factories kind of came back up online sooner than anticipated. I want to say we started delivering in July. And not only were we able to deliver all of that, we were able to have enough stock in for the holiday spike too, which is where, another huge piece of that growth came from. So it was a lot of fun, very stressful. But we also just felt, very impactful. We were giving away product to healthcare and, masks. They were worried about disinfecting masks, and we're very transparent. UVC light, all of our tests are on hard, non-porous surfaces. Fabrics, even the masks, we can't guarantee the exact same disinfection.
Yeah.
But healthcare moved away, and they still are more focused, less on like 99.9999% disinfection and a little bit more on just breaking the chain. Like even 99% now is better than nothing. And if you repeat that disinfection process over time, it's going to just get better and better. So we were giving out products for masks that were being reused and, just helping any way we could. Obviously employing people, which was great during the time, both marketing, operations, sales, obviously warehouse, you name it. So a lot of fun. I mean, we'd always seen success. We'd always had healthy growth, but this was the first time really experiencing hyper growth, and it was a great learning experience.
That's awesome. From a marketing perspective, like, did
Mhm.
you double down on your marketing, or did you just kind of let the pandemic do its
Mhm.
thing?
Both. I mean, so we moved up the funnel as we already had. We started the
Yeah.
business coming out of digital marketing and being bootstrapped. We started the business all low funnel, keywords, Google, things like that. We've
Yeah.
moved up. I want to say 2018, 2019, we were already doing like radio, podcasts. Um, and then during the pandemic, we even did like some TV and otherwise. And when I say
Okay.
TV, obviously we'd been on TV, we'd done sales on Good Morning America, things like that. But like actually paying for ad spots was during the pandemic. So early on, we didn't change much, but we really just wanted to maximize everything that happened that year. So coming into holiday of 2020, we were spending a whole lot more on everything, radio, TV, you name it. And it all worked, right? I mean, it was a kind of special feeling. Our product's always been niche. We actually never thought it would be that big.
Yeah.
Um, we'd surpassed revenue goals that we thought this business would be before the pandemic, and of course pandemic was just nothing like we'd ever imagined. So um, it kind of proved us wrong, at least through the pandemic. And but it was a little harder to sell before, and it was really easy to sell during COVID. So I think we probably could have had a better ROI, but we also just wanted to get everywhere we could. And I guess, as I'm thinking about it again, moving into holiday, we started to see the competitors. So Samsung had a version that was out, and they just flipped it out of China. And, we've tested it, and it isn't very effective. Philips, same thing. And then, of course, all these no-name brands. So coming into holiday of 2020, we also needed to spend
Yeah.
because now there was competitors out there.
Gotcha. Okay. So coming out of COVID, people were a little less worried about germs.
Yeah.
Plus, you had a bunch of competitors come into market. I mean,
Hmm.
it got harder to sell the product at the end of the day. I think the
Yeah.
Shuey household went from probably buying one of those huge Germex bottles a
Yeah.
month to
Yeah.
maybe a couple a year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we definitely don't use our phone soap as much as we did
Yeah.
when we were right smack dab in the middle of, holy
Hmm.
smokes, you've got germs on you. Like, you've got germs on
Yeah.
your phone. So
That's right.
how did you have to shift again to either keep the momentum or start rebuilding that momentum? What did
Hmm.
you have to do differently to really start carrying you through where we are today
Yeah.
and through the rest of the 2020s?
Yeah. It's very difficult. We just so many headwinds and issues from the FDA to the EPA to
Ooh, I
consumer
forgot about
behavior.
those.
There's a whole lot of stuff that I
Oh,
tried
yeah.
not. You're making me relive. It's been a painful 3 years. I mean, So we said the pandemic was the best thing that's ever happened to us. And then we were like, it's kind of the best and worst thing. And now I'm like, it's just the worst thing that's ever happened to us. And, you know, looking back, I don't have any regrets. Well, I shouldn't say that. Plenty of regrets, but I don't feel like we could have done it much differently. You know, no one would have anticipated that the concern around it would have gone away that quickly. So we knew it was a spike,
Sure.
but it was how long are vaccines going to take? I mean, there were so many questions, and on top of that, there was like plenty of concerns that China would shut down again. So coming into holiday of 20, we overbought even to what we normally would to anticipate basically like the next year having still high sell through, lower than we did, like but still higher than we normally do. But we thought, look, we gotta protect ourselves against the risk of our factory shutting down because they were telling us it could happen any day again, and their cases were still high.
Yeah.
So we kind of go into 21 with a lot of product, and then really, I want to say February of 21, the vaccine hits, and sales just dropped. Now they were still higher than pre-pandemic,
Just
but they
because
dropped.
of a vaccine.
That's the only thing that I can
Wow.
pin it to. So we missed slightly, even though we grew 5x during
Yeah.
holiday. So we could start telling the competitors, especially Samsung, are impacting us. Like there
Mm.
were signals and things, but that was like, wind out of the sails. And then we'll talk about the headwinds. And again, it was still like fine, right? You could manage, but going from where we were to where we're at was difficult. And what I mean is, like, looking back, we would have done things differently. We wouldn't have ordered quite as high. We had a little too much cash in inventory. We would have worked more with contractors than full-time employees, and it just would have been a smoother transition back to normal.
Yeah.
But we figured it would have been at least 6 months, probably another year. On top of that, we were making some serious impact, and we had really cool plans for products. Like we had masks for healthcare that were enclosed. I'm sure you've seen the Dyson headphones,
Yeah.
like that, but actually real. They worked. They had this case that sucked in
Hmm.
air, cleaned the air, fed them healthy air. Like we've had some incredible stuff in the pipeline, and so we were investing heavily in R&D to really impact the world for good. Air monitoring and full facilities, a lot of cool stuff, and there are people working on it now just in their own divisions. We just have a whole company doing it all. But there was a recent article by Vox: UV light kills virus, why isn't it everywhere? And that's what we started noticing, which is like, it's
Hmm.
proven, we know it works, why isn't it everywhere? And we still don't have a great answer to that.
Interesting.
But coming out of it, sales dropped fairly quickly, and it was managing, that, right? The team and the excess inventory, as it turned out to be excess. And we really pin it on the vaccine changing that. Now, what's funny is it became so political when it didn't need to. But what I can say is, no matter what people were saying, no one cared about disinfecting. They might have said they did, but no one did. You're right. Like that interest just really went away, and we struggled with our identity for a year or two, just like deer in the headlights. Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
So we have transitioned. We still overspent in marketing too for that first year on purpose, because we weren't sure if we were losing just sales to Samsung or if truly volume's down. Obviously, we could tell on Google search and Amazon brand analytics that yes, volume was down, but still we weren't sure how much we were losing to the big names, because you get someone like Samsung coming in, that makes a big difference. Um, I'll just hit some of the headwinds briefly as they come to my mind. The EPA's one. We've been really the only company compliant with the EPA. The EPA ironically monitors us, not the FDA, because we kill bugs, right? So like Clorox wipes are monitored by the EPA. While we don't use liquid, which I think you often think about with the EPA, we are killing similar types of buggers, and so the EPA monitors us. We're like the only firm who cared about that and has registered. So you saw
Huh.
product coming in kind of under the radar from China and selling it for real cheap. And we had issues with the EPA. They would say, hey, you can't say this, you can't say that. They'd hold our product at the border. There was all sorts of stuff going on, and we fixed it all. We cleaned it all up, got it all in. But they caused significant challenges when we were trying to make positive impact. And um, then you move on to the FDA. So in 2022, or maybe the end of 21, we had our brand new kind of the next phase of our business called the Surface Soap. It was a wand that killed viruses on any surface, and it would do it in 2 seconds. It was very effective. So it was, a Clorox wipe. If you wipe a table down, you actually need to leave the liquid on for like 5 to 10 minutes, depending on which one you use to kill the bacteria. Ours did in 2 seconds. So we started selling that, seeing really good success, kind of moving our business to the next stage again, kind of like reinventing ourselves, to your point. And then the FDA shut it down. They said it's too dangerous. And, we gave a lot of data as to how we protect the user, et cetera, but they weren't having it. So that was kind of the next thing that brought us down. And then moving into 22, all of our competitors started liquidating. So Samsung, they seem to have stopped selling their product. They don't sell it anymore. Amazon doesn't sell it anymore, but a bunch of resellers do. And they're selling it for like $15, right?
Yeah.
And then all of our competitors were in the $20 to $10 range. And so, you just had all of these headwinds coming against us, and it just became very difficult to sell the product, especially when, you see a name like Samsung for $15. You're like, I'm not going to buy a PhoneSoap for 80,
Never heard of PhoneSoap. Yeah.
So we had to start lowering our prices too, and we worked through a lot of that. And honestly, last year was kind of where we finally started seeing a lot of those fall off. Now they still exist. Samsung's still there. Samsung's still cheap, but we've been able to move our prices back up and re-engage our brand. And at the end of the day, I mentioned we've now moved away from just like, hey, kills bacteria, kills viruses, all of our old messages. And we've really started just trying to focus on like support your immune system, right? No one wants to get sick. Like we'll all admit that. So maybe we don't want to be freaked out about the flu, or we don't want to hear what it is, but we want to be healthier. So we've tried to kind of connect ourselves to like people who are eating healthier or going to the gym, and it's like you're trying to live a healthy lifestyle. PhoneSoap helps you with that, right? We partner with your immune system. Your immune system can only handle so much bacterial load, so it's doing a great job. We believe in your immune system, but eventually there's too much, and PhoneSoap minimizes the amount that you have to deal with to just help you in your healthy lifestyle. And so we've started seeing that work. We've launched new products that haven't been shut down by the FDA: water bottles, air purifiers, toothbrush sanitizers. So we're just doing everything we can to kind of like just get back into the good graces of people, right? Where they're not like, they see an ad and they're just like, ugh, I don't want to look at that. So that's our journey, Greg. So it's been a long journey. It's been fun. I mean, I learned a lot in just regular growth. I learned a lot in hyper growth. I learned even more during shrinkage, and it's just been a wild ride.
Okay, I have one follow-up question.
Yeah.
From what we just barely talked about. So you said you're starting to change kind of your messaging and positioning.
Yeah.
How has that impacted your marketing? Like, what are you doing anything different from a marketing perspective?
Well, yeah, I mean, from a messaging perspective and like a visual perspective, but from an ad buying, not necessarily yet, right? I mean, the team's smaller than it once was, right? So moving quickly is, well, harder and easier, I guess, ironically. You get that. But it's not like we were corporate size. We were still moving fairly fast. And so we've had to really figure out, at a pace maybe a little slower than we want to, what's working, what are the analytics, what's good, what's bad, right? Apple kind of came in the mix in all of this too. And basically now everyone's just buying billboards again, right? So we're not like overly targeted, but we've tried just really broad video ads, but focus more on health, move them into the funnel, move them into email, SMS, move them down to retargeting. And so similar activities, but just different messaging. And I guess what I'm saying is we're just starting to see the ROI come back.
Cool.
Which is helpful. And we do that both by in the channel with the data that we can see. But for the past few years, I've often just focused on, look, what's our total marketing spend? to our total sales, and let's keep that at a healthy number and give our team a little freedom in there to figure out what does work and doesn't work, which is less. It's like I grew up in this digital world, which was so
Sure.
fun, and I thought I was an advertising creative guy, but it turns out I like the numbers, and it was an adventure. So like I missed that, but it's also like a little relaxing. You kind of take a step back, and it's just like, well, just do the basics, right? And see what works versus this over analyzing, this ad with green versus that ad with blue. And I know people still do it. You probably do, and that is effective. But like, it's also been kind of a breath of fresh air to just say, let's just throw out some wide variations of content and see what is driving better click through, better conversion where we can track it, all the above.
Yeah, I love that. I love to hear that you're doing that too. I think that that's kind of the future, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
We talked about that on another podcast episode. Is just data loss, like with
Yeah.
privacy laws and cookie list tracking.
Hmm.
It's kind of a mess out there, and we have to go
Yeah.
back to how marketers operated before analytics, even, right? Like,
Yeah.
what is our marketing spend, and how
Yeah.
is that impacting our overall business? So, I
Yeah. It's
love
funny.
that.
We're just kind of moving old school again
Yeah.
in a digital world in a different way. One thing that's worked really well for us, which is ironic, is we do these TikTok ads, or videos that without ads, organic, that have, we probably have 100 million views across our channel. And one of our biggest is on TikTok alone, it's probably 25-ish, maybe 30-ish,
Hmm.
but it also did well on Instagram and TikTok. Of we took bacteria testing plates, and we put them underneath a hand dryer, right? And we showed that, look, your hand dryer is actually just sucking in all the bacteria, all the fecal
So
matter in the
gross.
air, and blowing it on your hands. And we do a lot of videos like this. We've tested the top of, soda cans from the gas station, and it gets a ton of momentum. So like, I'm sitting here saying people don't care about germs. Well, they watch our videos and they comment, and they sort of do, right? And that's when
And
we realized,
then I go
okay.
back to the gas station and get my caffeine fix.
Yes, but then what do you actually do about it, right? No, you're right. But that's when we realized, okay, there's still something here. We just need to kind of lay off the you're going to die from it, and
Sure.
just be like, look, that still is gross. Like, isn't it gross? So it's almost like going back to our same idea of like, look, there's fecal matter on your phone, and I don't know, maybe you're going to get really sick from it, but in general, that's like sick. You don't want poop on your face, So we don't say it that way anymore, but it's
Yeah.
kind of that same idea of like, look, you want a healthy lifestyle. This stuff is gross. Let us help you out. So,
Cool.
so TikTok has been wildly successful from us on an organic standpoint. We got into their early TikTok shop. We've run ads. Those don't see as much success. You know what I mean? So it's just like this,
Interesting.
I don't know. We're still figuring things out, but we know we're getting volume back to our website, via these types of organic content too.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. So I'm a big believer in kind of the mindset that all businesses will have some kind of thing that happens to them that will create a massive shift in how they operate. So
Hmm.
do you have any final parting words of wisdom for anyone who's currently experiencing that massive shift, whether it's in
Hmm.
their industry, whether it's in their customer base, whatever? Any
Yeah.
final words?
Well, I would say, so coming up and out of Zappos, for me, it's just always been the customer first, right? Like, find a way in your hyper growth to still, care about that individual buyer, and, protect their purchase and their happiness with your product. And, you'll see continued success. I think anyone going through a spike, obviously, as someone who's been through a pandemic, it's just, hey, take a step back and make sure that this seems to be driven not by one massive land on, a huge podcast or a virus. Like, you'll be able to tell when it's when it's momentum that will sustain
Yeah.
versus us. But I can say, if you can tell that it's something driven by a spike, just be relatively smart about how you grow, and how you hire and how you fulfill. But I think if someone's being realistic, it's pretty easy to tell when it's a spike versus just organic continued. You know what I mean by organic, not necessarily paid or organic, but just, real growth that will sustain. So those are my two parting words, right? Really get a feel for why you're growing, and if you really believe it's sustainable, that'll help you stay healthy moving forward. And in that whole process, taking care of your customers, and I should and want to add employees too.
Yeah.
Which again, that those are things we don't regret, right? Like, we cared a lot about them. We did a lot of good things for them, our employees and the community, and that was meaningful and felt good, and something that you don't regret, even though it was painful, having to send some employees on, right? Which I'd never had to do before, but they all we were transparent during the whole process, so that's kind of how we protected them, and they all were able to land quickly and safely, and were like grateful, and had a great time while they were here. So that's what matters to me: customers, employees, and then just be really data driven around where that spike's coming from and why.
Nice. I love it. Cool, man. Well, thank you again for taking some time out of your busy schedule to chat. I
Yes,
know
sir.
I enjoyed the story. I learned a couple of things that I hadn't known before.
Good.
So thank you so much for sharing. And I
Yeah.
wish you guys the best of luck throughout the rest of the year. Hope you guys kill it.
Awesome, Greg. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so that's a wrap for this week. In next week's episode, I will have our VP at Stride, Laurel Tusher, back on. We're going to talk about fishing in ponds and meeting your potential customers where they spend time online. So in that episode, we plan to talk about the different tools you can use to really figure out where your target audience is, how to organically jump into conversations and initiate discussions with folks, and then how to tailor an ad strategy to each platform. So that should be a really good listen for brands that are trying to get traction outside of just your media buying, your Google, your Meta ads. So, alrighty, I think that's enough for today. So as always, take what you've learned here and make a plan and take massive action this year. Thanks for joining us.